everyone, and welcome to our very first lecture um, of the semester. And today we're going to really be starting in Unit 1, which is naturally going to be the era of exploration and colonization. And we're talking roughly here from 1492 all the way to 1763. Now, this will be a good little intro in general, whether you be a physical folk or online. Kind of my policy of note taking. I'm not going to make sure you take each and every note, but instead what I would do is encourage you to kind of have your own sheet of notebook paper, spiral notebook, whatever kind of you want to use, writing utensil, paper in front of you, and really just kind of copy, I would say, the title of the notes, in this case, The Age of Exploration, at the very top of the paper, and then really just hit bullet points. And I only want you to write down what's in bold. So only write down in these notes what's in bold. And that might be, as we go further and further into the semester, might be more notes you're taking, but especially early on, it's not going to be all that many. But again, only write down kind of for yourself notes in bold. And again, I'm not going to go back and check on this, but you really are going to learn better if you write it down for yourself. So again, I highly encourage you to write only the things in bold that you see in these PowerPoints. And those are going to be the same PowerPoints that I would have in class generally. And if you're, just virtual, it's going to be all the same PowerPoints, the same info, and it just, same stuff. Okay. So Age of Exploration, like I said, 1492 to 1763. So this is going to be the kind of the widest amount of time we're going to be talking about over the course of this class. So all the other units are going to be much smaller amounts of time. This one, however, is, about 175 years of time, right? So, almost 275 years worth of time, right? So a good amount of time there. A lot of stuff's going to happen naturally. And again, Age of Exploration is where we're starting. So, in general, why did these European powers want to colonize? Well, big key thing is going to be the acquisition of resources, acquiring resources that, you need gold, you need silver, you need wood, you need all sorts of things it takes to have your own kind of not only sustaining nation, but quite possibly a global empire. But the key problem for these European nations, and when we're talking about these key European nations, we're referring to England, France, Spain, Italy, Portugal, kind of a lot of the same major powers of Europe today. Some of the Prussian states before they unified to be Germany in the late 19th century. Nonetheless, this is, again, we're talking about the main European powers here. And again, they want to acquire resources. They need stuff to operate, all stuff that generates money. But again, they don't want to have to fight wars with their neighbors, right? That at this particular time in European history, they had fought a bunch of wars. They had, they were even still several hundred years later coming off the Black Death. And so they really didn't want to have to kind of come in direct contact in terms of fighting one another, but they still needed resources. So naturally, if we can't get it from here in Europe, we're going to have to get it from somewhere else. And so the appeal of the East, and when I'm talking about the East, I'm talking about Asia, basically, okay? So they realize Asia has tons of resources, have tons of things that we can pluck from Asia and make of great use here in Europe, whatever nation that may be. So it's all about, okay, how can we find a quicker, easier way to get to Asia in the East? And when I say quick and easy, we're still talking about months of expedition, if not years of expedition, okay? So all these kind of colonization efforts are going to be very costly, not just in terms of money, but the use of resources, and sometimes in some cases, actual lives are lost as well. Okay, so there are going to be some advancements in seafaring technologies that makes colonization of the East, which is again Asia, an easier proposition. One of those is going to be the compass, right? So newer technology with the compasses allowed for more, more accurate directional idea of where you're going, right? So you have a true north, so okay, this is directly north, which means that's west, that's east, that's south behind us, okay? So it really kind of changed the way and the ease with which these European kind of colonization efforts, and not only just large scale, but on a smaller scale, even on a personal level, if you're wanting to know where you're going, a compass is going to be a much more accurate way to track that, okay? Some other things as well. astrolabes, which are basically these navigational devices used to judge the sun's position, that are another even more accurate way to calculate direction, latitude, local time, all sorts of things. So astrolabes going to be a new key navigational device, again, to measure the sun's position, to calculate direction, latitude, local time. Also, a caravel. Now, this is going to actually be a Portuguese vessel that can carry up to 130 tons. Now, today's modern ships can carry much, much more than even 130 tons, which is actually a lot, obviously. Okay. But these Portuguese vessels, what was important about them is that they could actually travel in shallow water as well, right? Because naturally, as a seafaring adventurer, if you have a ship or, sea craft, you want to be able to get in as shallow water as possible, because if not, if the, water, ground goes to here, and you kind of have, a ship that's going to be easy to crash kind of and run itself aground, that's going to be a costly mistake, right? So these could travel in much shallow water, which meant that you could navigate waterways that you had never been able to navigate before. So these come out of Portugal, and Portugal, we're going to see, is going to be a key early leader of this age of exploration. However, all these other nations are going to say, oh, wow, Portugal's doing really good. We need to do what we can to catch up as quickly as possible. So this comes out of Portugal, and this going to kind of, other nations are going to buy these caravel vessels, and it also spurs these other nations to create their own equivalencies for these caravel vessels. Okay, so again, as I said, Portugal is going to have a early massive influence, probably the earliest of which and biggest of which in some ways is going to be Henry the Navigator. Now, Henry the Navigator is going to be a prince of Portugal, and in 1419, he's going to establish Portugal as a center for astronomical and geographical studies. So he's saying, hey, everyone, listen, come to Portugal. We have all the best kind of libraries. We have all the best information. We have all the best tools for the kind of more astronomical and geographical studies. So he's going to say, hey, everybody come to Portugal. This is going to be the place where you're going to be able to learn all you need to know about judging kind of where the stars are, where the sun is, and geography, where you need to go. Okay, so he's going to invite all sorts of map makers, astronomers, shipbuilders from the known world. So not just from Portugal, but from all these other big nations as well. So England, France, Spain, all these big nations of Europe. He's going to say, hey, everybody come. Let's kind of draw and figure out new, quicker routes to Asia that way, right? So if we have all the best minds of the world coming together, we can all, create these new great routes for Asia. Okay, so another key, this is, almost 100 years later, a guy by the name of Ferdinand Magellan is going to be a Portuguese mariner, which is another name for kind of a guy, working a ship or working a vessel for Spain. So he's actually Portuguese, but he's sailing under the Spanish flag. That's going to be something very similar to a very important guy you already know, I'll talk about in just a moment, in 1520, who set sail for South America. Now, the problem with Ferdinand Magellan is, on his journeys trying to sail into South America, he's actually going to be killed in the Philippine Islands, which are all the way in the Pacific. And his crew is going to actually continue west. And in 1522, this is going to be very important, is going to be this crew is going to be the first known people to circumnavigate the world, meaning they went all the way around the world. First time that ever happened, 1522. So it's kind of funny here. Magellan gets all the credit for being the first person to do this, when really it was his crew. He had been killed by Filipino natives, indigenous people of the Philippines, saying, hey, get lost. And he got lost quite literally when they killed him. Okay. But his crew was going to be the first to circumnavigate the world. So Magellan dies in the Philippines, but his crew in 1522 circumnavigates the globe, which is, of course, going to be a key, massive, important event. And so I found this kind of funny. When your expedition to the East Indies accidentally circumnavigates the world, Mr. Worldwide. So he was even before Pitbull as far as being Mr. Worldwide. Pitbull is probably even an old reference for y'all at this point. But yeah, Pitbull, bald guy, wears glasses a lot. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. Christopher Columbus. Now, similar to Magellan, in the sense that he was of a certain ethnicity or nationality, but he sailed under another flag for his expedition. Columbus is going to be Italian. So Columbus himself was Italian, and he has this idea, hey, I want to sail west to the Indies to open up new trade routes. Now, this idea was a little bit new in the sense that, hey, if we go west, that's going to be different because most people were always going east, which means if you're going from Europe, you're going around the Horn of Africa and then going all the way east, that way, right? So he was saying, hey, let's go west. And this goes back to the whole notion that back in that day, there were lots of people who actually thought, hey, we'll actually sail off the face of the earth, that the earth is flat. And if we keep going west, we're going to just drop off the face of the earth. They had no conception, really, that some did, more and more people, that the earth was round and that it was going to be possible to go west, and then you go around the globe, and that'd maybe be a quicker way to Asia. Okay, he had trouble selling that idea naturally, again, because of this idea, hey, maybe the earth is flat and we could actually drop off the earth, which we can laugh at now. But people like Kyrie Irving and some more modern people actually buy into this flat earth theory. Maybe you do. I can assure you the earth is not flat. Okay, you can look pretty clearly and see the earth is a sphere. Nevertheless, I'm not going to call you out for that. That's your own personal opinion if you think that, even though it's not true. Whatever. But moving on. He had trouble selling his idea for that reason, for one, that we could maybe drop off the earth. But naturally, this is going to be a very expensive expedition. And all these expeditions, as I said earlier, were quite expensive. And so that could be its own big trouble, right? So he goes to his native Italy and says, hey, Italy, why don't you fund this kind of expedition for me? And they say, no, thanks, we're not interested. And so instead, and he also goes to Portugal because, again, Portugal was kind of this key leader early on in this possible age of exploration. They say, no, we don't want to fund it either. But Spain, on the other hand, does go for Columbus's plan. So Spain says, okay, we'll go for this. And they fund a pretty massive expedition on Columbus's part. So, again, I want to emphasize this. Columbus is an Italian, but he sails under the Spanish flag, which means he has Spanish resources, Spanish money, Spanish vessels, Spanish men, and, the Spanish crown is saying, okay, go out and plant whatever you find or whatever new routes you find, you're going to plant that flag for Spain, meaning Spain has kind of claims to whatever that territory is. Okay, so as I said, at this time, really, that their conception was, okay, we go from Europe all the way around Africa, which was kind of a long journey, and then you pass through the Indian Ocean, and then you get to Asia. Okay, so that's what the world map in 1492, especially from a European perspective, really did look like. Now, you may know this, there had been some earlier expeditions by some Asian nations. They're going west and finding some of the kind of coastal regions of North America and South America. But for the most part, they weren't super, super interested in going that far west. They were more concerned with their own territory. So, again, Europe, to go east, they had to go all the way around here to get to Asia. Columbus is saying, hey, let's actually go, his conception was the earth is round. So if we go, leave Spain here, we'll go here and then end up on the other side. That'll be a quicker journey, right? Well, Columbus himself isn't even going to be aware of the enormity of what he discovers. Okay, so he's going to, leave Spain from here, go through, go across the Atlantic Ocean, and end up landing in the Bahamas. Now, again, he thinks he's actually found the Indies. So to go back really quick, he thinks he's went from here all the way over to here, and that he's actually found this new area of the Indies. But again, what he instead did was land in the Bahamas. So he had no idea he was doing this, but he actually has discovered, and we'll talk about that notion of discovered later on. He thinks, okay, I'm in this new area, when in actuality, he was somewhere else entirely in the Bahamas. I'll leave this up for a second here. So now I want to emphasize this. Columbus dies later on in the 1500s, having thinks that he just kind of discovered this new part of the Indies. He has no idea, really, that he just quote, discovered. And again, this land was here before he discovered it. Well, as I said, we'll talk about that notion of discovered later. That in actuality, there's all this land that these European powers really had no idea existed. Okay, so his first voyage in 1492, and he goes back a handful of times. He actually dies poor, by the way, which you think a guy who would have be as famous as him now would have lived a life of great wealth and success. He actually dies relatively poor and relatively obscure in his day, even though now we remember him as being this big, great guy. Okay, so it's not until Amerigo Vespucci some years later, who is yet another Italian sailing under the Spanish flag, he explores the coast of South America, and he himself thinks he was in East Asia. But he's going to start to say, wait a minute, we think we discovered this over here, but in actuality, or, not discovered, but we found new parts of Asia. In actuality, there's something entirely new. There's something that us European powers had no idea quite existed. Okay, so Amerigo Vespucci, again, this Italian map maker, says, wait a minute, actually there's all this new land that we need to kind of discover, which some people say, well, we still need to get to Asia, but more and more people are starting to say, hey, wait a minute. So if there's all this new land, all these new opportunities now exist for the possibilities of making money. So all this new land exists, and the North America, South America, the United States of America, all that America, what becomes this new land, is going to come from Amerigo's name. So Amerigo Vespucci, America is where his name is adapted, and all this new land is called or referred to as the Americas or the New World, right? And again, I want to keep saying this whole notion of the New World, or this land was new or discovered, is all not true, right? That this land existed for some time before Europe was aware of it or known about it. And not only that, there's going to be plenty of peoples who live in this land long before Columbus and long before Amerigo Vespucci come along. So again, that whole idea of these continents known as the Americas comes from Amerigo Vespucci himself, an Italian mapmaker. Shock, right? That, wait, all of a sudden there's all this new untapped territory for us to discover. So that's going to do it for kind of our very first lecture for today. You're going to be seeing this in Edpuzzle. So again, make sure you've answered all the questions along the way. That'll count for kind of a weekly participation for you. So this is Mr. Huffman signing off, and can't wait to see you soon.